Well, hey there, everyone. I am Cameron Woodward. I'm one of the co-founders here at Wrapbook. Really delighted and excited to have you here with us today as we talk about how to keep your production company secure in the digital era. If you've never heard of Wrapbook before, we are a all-in-one platform to make entertainment payroll simple, taking all of the complexity and the compliance required to pay cast and crew very simple and developed and delivered through beautiful software technology. Today I'm really excited to have a conversation with my colleague, Darrell Stinson. Darrell, what do you do here at Wrapbook?
Hey, Cameron. First, thanks for having me. Excited to be talking with you all today. I'm Director of Security and Compliance, and I pretty much direct our security program, ensure that we keep customer data secure, corporate assets secure, and kind of stay along the lines of compliance.
That's awesome. Well, the reason why we invited you to have this conversation is to take some of your experiences in keeping Wrapbook services secure and share your knowledge that you've gained over the years with our clients and with production operators, and why risk is everywhere and how it really applies in the digital world these days as well. Many of the people watching this, they're very familiar with risk. They're familiar with the risks that they cover with their insurance products. They're familiar with the risks that they take on when doing a project and managing budgets and locations. But as the world, especially after the pandemic, has really accelerated the use of digital tools, I thought it would be an awesome opportunity for you to kind of take your experience and apply it to the digital risks that now kind of emerge. It's awesome that we have these great tools like Wrapbook and Zoom to make our production operations better. But as I've learned working with you, these also present some big risks. Darrell, before we jump into your presentation though, I come from a production background, but you don't. What's your background? What did you do before you kind of joined a production operations organization like Wrapbook?
Right. So some time ago, actually somewhere around 20 years ago, I got started in the U.S. Army. So part of my job was information systems security. It was support and communications, ensuring that the lines of communication were encrypted and could not be intercepted. Also ensuring that some of the devices that we use, whether it was a computer or a communication device, a satellite, was also protected. So it's a really, really broad category of practice that at the time, I had no idea existed, but has created space for me in a career. And I've been able to learn so many more things throughout the timeline.
That's awesome. You then went on and you worked in corporations, helping to keep them, secure digitally. You do that here now at Wrapbook. I was just mentioning that there's lots of different production risks that, our audience are very familiar with. But on the digital side of things, what are some of the risks just from a digital perspective that companies face?
Right. So comparing this to maybe military operations in the corporate space, some of the risks is often really the same. The data and intelligence is important. Wrapbook has customers. Our customers have different types of data that we ingest, like personally identifiable information, tax information, addresses, dates of birth. All this information is very critical, right? And that's really the business that Wrapbook is in, is ensuring that our customers and clients are able to use their information and use the platform for a successful production, but do it securely.
So on shoots in production world, it is very common for people to fill out pieces of paper with their name, their address, their social security number, and then these papers get passed around and end up typically in a Wrapbook, sometimes on a shelf somewhere collecting dust. Is that risky? And I think the answer is going to be yes, but what are the implications of that,
Right. So, I come from a time where folks would write all their passwords and tape them underneath a keyboard. But we've all gotten a lot better about that and digitize this data, right? So if you are not digitizing your data, it could really end up anywhere. Even if you, for instance, take a social security document, right, that has critical or personal information on it and throw it in the trash can. There are dumpster divers who are willing to go through the rubbish, right, to collect this information and utilize it to create accounts in other folks' names, create lines of credit, and then even do, worse things like steal folks' identity to impersonate people.
So if a production company has a data leak, or if they are compromised in some way with the digital tools that they use, who's responsible for that occurring?
That's a great question. And ultimately, the company who ingests this data is still liable, is still responsible for protecting their customers' data. It's a fiduciary responsibility to use encryption, to use separation of duties, to use at least privilege, and only grant access to certain types of information where folks need it.
Interesting. So in our conversation today, I understand that you're going to kind of walk through some of the best practices that we use here at Wrapbook to keep data secure, but applying some of these tips to how production companies can also use these types of measures to keep their organizations secure on the digital front. And with that, I'll let you kind of take it away in terms of the tips that you use here at Wrapbook and how they can be applied at production companies. And if I have any questions, I'll just jump in because I'm not the expert here on this.
Sure. Thanks, Cameron. Let's get right to it. First thing, maybe we can set the stage with a poll. And we're really going to kind of ask, how confident are you that your team can successfully and efficiently identify a phishing email? We'll let folks go ahead and get their answers in, and the poll will show up here shortly.
I'm curious to see the answers here. Pretty confident.
All right, so we have 55% of us are pretty confident that our teams can successfully identify a phishing email. 45% of us think it's debatable, and it seems like everyone here knows what an email is. So we're off to a pretty good start. Let's talk about a few other things, right? With respect to phishing emails. So there are roughly about 3 billion phishing emails sent each day. So this could be from script kiddies, this could be from nation state actors, this can be different countries collecting data or attacking other countries. But phishing emails are one of the easiest methods for bad actors to reach a large amount of folks at the same time. And it's really a numbers game. And some of the things that we really want to kind of encourage our team to look for when it comes to phishing emails is sense of urgency. Usually you're asked to perform some sort of action like buy gift cards or grant access, or even send some sort of payment. It may be attention to a particular group. So finance teams are often attacked with this or targeted for this. And really this is something that Wrapbook goes through and practices in phishing emails so that our team and our employees are proficient at identifying red flags.
Darrell, it's almost surprising. Like, people have heard of phishing emails. It almost seems ridiculous. We're all used to like getting spam. Like, how serious or how often are phishing emails like the reason for a data breach at companies?
That's an awesome question. Some years ago, IBM did a study where 90% of breaches that occur are caused by some sort of human factor or enabled by some sort of human. They start often with phishing emails, social engineering.
When somebody gets into a system of a company through a phishing mechanism, like what kind of damage are they able to do?
So there's a plethora of things that can be done. So a bad actor could perform a lateral movement, which is what we call basically moving across the environment, going from computer to computer, server to server, resource, changing permissions, deleting data, um, shutting down services that are critical to the business. And if they have access to financial resources, they can extract uh, can cause monetary damage as well.
Hmm. So, it's interesting. I'm curious, what the heck should companies do to address this? Like, it seems like you're constantly being attacked, that there's opportunities for people to get in all of the time. What should production companies go after to make it not happen?
Sure. Well, we have a few pointers here, but at a high level, create awareness around how the production company does business, how your team handles emails, who's authorized to perform certain duties. Um, Let them know where certain lines of communication, where certain information will come from. If you have an email system, if folks are using Wrapbook to access certain types of data, it's just important for the team or the crew to understand what the protocols is, what the protocols are, and how the team does business.
So, something that's interesting in the production world, you know, a company doesn't, in large corporations, everybody gets a company email. In the production world, we're oftentimes hiring cast and crew members, sending emails with critical production information, and they're using their own emails. Like, as it relates to phishing and individual identities with their own emails to the company, like, are there any pointers or things that production companies should kind of be keeping in mind with like this type of risk for their companies?
Yeah, that really speaks to this third item here of creating company-owned accounts, right? And this is where we offer Wrapbook to our customers and clients, where you can standardize what folks access in one centralized portal or resource where folks get all their information. You can upload pertinent documents or important documents, and the critical confidential information that's at stake here, which is basically PII, tax data,
What's
information
PII?
that's personally identifiable information. So
Got it.
this is your birth date, your address. Yeah, often it can be your IP address, even where that's called linkable data, where you could link it to something else and identify a real person. But your name, your date of birth, social security number, and then other information that you simply would not want floating around, your neighborhood or across the internet. One of my favorite things. So multi-factor authentication. I often tell folks that if you set it up right, it doesn't matter if someone has your username and password. So multi-factor authentication allows you to add an additional step to confirming your identity, right? Basically, if you take maybe your bank or maybe another resource that you use that allows MFA, Wrapbook offers MFA, but basically you have a registered device and it will send additional information upon logging in to say, hey, is this really you? And you can approve it one more time. And often some breaches and attacks have been prevented simply by having multi-factor authentication in place. And this is one of the things that Wrapbook is really proud of having offered to our customers.
Darrell, this is something like there's like what's kind of a classic example of a multi-factor authentication? Does this add a lot of time? Like, how does this work? So to restate, it's just another layer of security on top of the email to like log into a service. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. So let's take Wrapbook for instance. All right, if you use our Google OAuth option, so you would enter your username and password, and then you would authorize Google to check with you to ensure that this is actually you logging in. So if you have this set up, you'll probably get a message on your phone that says, hey, you're trying to log into this particular portal. Do you authorize this, or is this really you? And you can say yes. Kind of a red flag would be if you're on vacation, you don't have a laptop with you, and you suddenly get a notification that you're trying to log into a particular portal or resource where you have a multi-factor, and you are certain that you aren't logging in. You can rest assured that, one, you have protection, additional protection in place, but you've been notified. Now you can take measures against it.
Something I wanted to just point out here, because if you're watching this and you're not familiar with Wrapbook, essentially all of these onboarding processes that are historically done with paper, people are writing all of their PII, and that paper is getting passed around. But with Wrapbook, once a cast and crew member has a Wrapbook account, it holds and stores all of that identifiable risky information behind bank level security that is then protected by multi-factor authentication. So when you onboard your cast or crew member, that documentation isn't being thrown around all willy-nilly. It's protected and backed up by multi-factor authentication. But that's Wrapbook. Like, I would imagine folks should be wary of this and aware of this related to other services that they use for their production companies. Yeah. So like we should be checking for MFA with other vendors that we use.
Absolutely. So Wrapbook, for the vendors or third parties that we partner with, we check for multi-factor authentication or support of the feature. And production crews and companies should certainly check with freelancers and vendors that they partner with to ensure that this layer of protection is offered or supported.
Cool.
Identify a dedicated expert, someone like myself. And basically the benefit here is you have someone who's privy to legal regulations, compliance measures, technology that's available to kind of help you not only be productive, but help you protect the resources that are part of your production, and simply modernize those practices and those controls in place.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot. That's really helpful. So phishing works, so it seems, and a way to combat against that is obviously education, but then also multi-factor authentication on services that your production company uses, whether that's Wrapbook or any other one. So training your team is really important. But another thing that I've learned through you, Darrell, is that oftentimes risks to our companies actually come from the inside, come from people who are on our team. You know, it's interesting in the production world, you know, we oftentimes crew up productions, sometimes very quickly. Someone comes in or out of a production very fast. We're hiring folks based off of referrals of other trusted crew members or department heads. And that's worth its weight in gold. Oftentimes you find some amazing cast and crew members through that system, but I'm curious if there are, you know, major digital security risks associated with kind of not taking the step to vet crew. What are your thoughts?
So we talked a little bit about, I want to take a step back just to let folks know that sometimes your crew won't always get it right? Sometimes they'll miss, you know, identifying a phishing email. Sometimes you'll bring start a relationship with a crew that maybe you didn't take out the proper diligence, right? And ensuring that this is the right partner for your crew. So in vetting your crew, one of the things that Wrapbook does is we execute background checks. And the importance of this, I'll point back to finance again, where you wouldn't want someone handling your finances who has been indicted for cyber crimes, who has been convicted of maybe money laundering or things related to finances that are unsavory. And that's just an example that they take, for instance, in the financial industry. But you want to ensure that folks are trustworthy, that there aren't any red flags, and that your production, the livelihood of your production is secure with all the business relationships that you start.
With background checks, do you happen to know, is this like an especially expensive thing to do? Do they go pretty quickly? Like, do you have any thoughts or recommendations for folks if they do wanted to actually implement a background check process in their production companies?
Sure, I'd say, start if you have someone on your crew who handles hiring, sourcing, and staffing, then I would have them start with a service. There are tons of different agencies that conduct background checks for you. They can be done in a matter of days, and they have different scopes based on what you need to investigate, how far they go back, and certain things that are important to you for the team members that you bring onto your crew.
Got it. So it seems like add more scrutiny and vigilance to the process, the closer to money staff members are, and then like even just full-time staff who have more access to kind of business critical systems and tools.
That's right. Not only money, right, but it's also the sensitivity of the data, right? So if you have someone who's handling or in processing new members to the production, to the crew, they're handling lots of personally identifiable information. They're handling social security numbers and identities. You want to ensure that these folks are trustworthy, basically.
Great. What's this here? We have tip 3. What is this?
Limit access. There's a number of ways. Folks on the call may be familiar with a buzzword known as zero trust, right? But it's really a practice to kind of ensure that folks only have the right amount of access that they need to be productive, and then you restrict certain visibility in areas where team members do not need it. And one of the ways to do that is by creating identities, controlled identities on the Wrapbook application.
Do you know, like, so other types of software that production companies might use, is it pretty common practice that there's like a granular permission setting? Like, so for example, like you mentioned Wrapbook, it's true. Like on Wrapbook, you can create a company, you can assign different permission levels, you can grant certain access. So it really follows this like zero trust protocol that you're talking about. But this is something that maybe companies should be aware of across the board with their different tools.
100%. So if you're using any type of file sharing platform, I'm sure folks are familiar with, Dropbox and Google Drive and those types of platforms. You want to ensure that you are granting access only to appropriate documents based on folks' role and what they need to actually perform related to the project.
Now, it's interesting though, right? Like that's only possible in a digital world. With paper,
how do you do that?
How do you do that? Yeah.
So let's start another poll and let's ask folks, just on curiosity, how many of us are already using digital solutions on set? Digital everything, baby. I like that.
I'm really curious to see this. Oh, wow.
This is great. I honestly expected someone to say they were paper only, but this is good. It shows the progress that we're making in the industry. That's great.
Yeah, the world is
so
really.
The majority of us were digital, and about 30% of us were half and half.
So, I mean, would you say you're of the opinion digital is just by far safer?
Digital is safer. Digital is more resilient. Digital is more reliable. Digital is more controllable. Digital enables more productivity. And this used to be a polarizing conversation around paper, simply, and I think it was more so tied to convenience, where some of us would say, well, paper's great and it works perfect for me. And I'll just ask a question. if there's a fire in your file cabinet, how do you recover from that? You can't. And that's just one example with digital, but all the other things and controls that we're talking about as far as limiting access and controlling visibility of certain types of data, certain types of resources, whether it's PII or you're this particular crew or you have this particular role. This is where digital enables you to be a lot more flexible. If you're a smaller team, digital allows you to do more with less resources. And it allows you to control the project a whole lot better. Protects you from privacy breaches. Let's say you lose some of those papers that have confidential information of your customers or your team members on it. That creates really large problems for you.
I understand you've got another tip for us as well.
Yes. Bet your vendors. Honestly, this is one of the things that Wrapbook always carries out when it comes to our vendor relationships. We simply call it a vendor management program. Based on the type of data that a vendor has access to or what their support will be to our organization, we ensure that we vet these vendors, that they either have the highest controls necessary to not only protect Wrapbook and our resources, but at the utmost protect our customers and the information and data that they entrust us with. Yeah, that's true. You're only as strong as your weakest link. This is true for phishing scams. This is true for technology that you use. This is true for levels of encryption that you implement. And this is really just a mindset that we kind of want to suggest to our clients. All right. So, this goes back to why we conduct background checks, why we want to ask all the right questions based on scope, based on levels of access, and based on contribution to the project.
So this could be like in the production context, like vendors are everything from, I would imagine, like our bank's digital portals, if we're using a piece of software for like call sheets, if we're using just like any sort of digital tool. Is that the case?
That's right. You really want to understand what's important to the project, right? And this should influence or direct the types of questions that you ask your vendors and your freelancers and your third parties that contribute to the project.
Can you give some examples? So like number one, you're saying hiring staff who know what they're doing. I'm guessing that means in part like hire folks who know even how to ask the right questions. What are the right questions to ask of a third-party vendor if my production company is thinking about working with them?
Let's say this third-party vendor will ingest critical data or confidential data, just like Wrapbook does. So we're personally identifiable information, birth dates, socials, addresses, tax information, handling your payroll. You want to ask, well, how do you encrypt data, right? How do you ensure separation of duties? What type of controls do you have in place for recovery or incident response? How do you keep hackers out? I mean, this is a rather broad, general question, but there are responses that can give you a feeling of assurance when it comes to saying, well, yeah, this is the right vendor, this is the right partner for my project.
So something that I know that we've talked about is, asking about service organization controls or SOC. Can you explain what SOC is, how it works, and help us understand, how SOC can be helpful or useful for our organizations as we think about using different services, whether it's Wrapbook or otherwise?
Sure. So a spin-off of saying, well, how do I know that my vendor is safe or this is the right partner for my project? Asking the right questions is a start, but SOC presents or imposes a framework of controls, right? A body of controls where you can start under security, availability, confidentiality, privacy, and processing integrity, for instance. But SOC isn't the only one. There are other ones like ISO 27001 from the Institute of Standards Organization, right? These frameworks or these body of controls help you ask the right questions. They help you gather the right evidence and artifacts to investigate and make an assessment of a particular vendor. SOC audits is something that Wrapbook regularly carries out to ensure not only that we are compliant with these controls, but that we have a reference point when it comes to what is the right thing to do with respect to new hire processes and terminations, how we handle separation of duties, how we grant access and handle tickets, responding to events or investigating certain things to ensure that there is no breach. Data recovery and business continuity, or disaster recovery and business continuity. These are all areas, that's not an exhaustive list, but areas that are captured under secure service organization controls.
It seems like a little bit of a summary of the points you just made. Maybe you could speak to it again just to help me understand as well. Like, so third-party audits, that's a third-party audit is.
Yeah, let me elaborate.
Or
Sure, let me elaborate that on a little bit. So a third-party audit is basically an audit or an assessment that's carried out by a particular body that is once removed from, let's say, the business, right? So they should be impartial in making their assessment. They should also have a reference point. SOC is one, ISO is another one, to make these assessments. And then they should validate their ratings of their judgment based on artifacts that back up the story. It's basically a security story that's being told here. These are really important. I use them to make assessments on all of the third parties that handle critical data and information with Wrapbook or partner with Wrapbook.
Mhm.
And data encryption is simply one of the mechanisms that are utilized to protect data or information either at rest or in transit.
So look, you know so much more about this than I ever will. And I'm putting on my producer hat. Like, I know that this is important. I know that my production company is liable if like there's a big leak. I'm now learning through you that like across training and vendor selection and background checks, like I've got to keep this stuff in mind to keep my production company from falling into this like pit of risk. Is it fair to say that like if we're choosing at, say, my hypothetical production company, a vendor of some kind, we should be looking for SOC compliance, and that these are kind of the questions we should ask about, like encryption? Is that fair? Is that a correct summation of kind of the details you were just digging into?
It's not an exhaustive list. Those are simply items that will be captured in this particular body of controls. But yes, those are questions that you certainly want to answer because it tells you about the diligence of the organization that you're partnering with. It tells you about the particular practices and protocols that they have in place that you can benefit from. Because you certainly don't want to experience a downstream breach or downstream mishandling of confidential data.
Super helpful. Thank you.
I want to go back to, I was trying to articulate ISO, and I want to make sure I make that clear for folks. It's International Organization for Standardization. So I think I said something different. So I want to make sure that's clear for folks on the call.
What is the relationship with ISO and SOC and encryption and this kind of relationship between them?
Sure. So there are two separate frameworks, right, or bodies of controls. and they make assessments a little bit differently, but there are overlaps in the controls that they have in scope. Encryption is certainly one of them. How you handle in processing or new hires is another one. Resilience, backup is another one. Separation of duties. Both frameworks cover all of these requirements or practices and controls. They simply engage them a little bit differently.
Got it.
That was a great question. All right. Google Drive, Dropbox versus email. I think folks are using these resources all over the planet, right? So let's take a poll and see who's using what. All right. Okay, so 45% of us are using Google Drive. 34% of us are using Dropbox, and 21% of us are using something else. All right, so that's cool. What we kind of want to talk about here is the importance of one, ensuring that the data or the information remains secure. The other part is ensuring that only the right folks have access to the information or the data that they need to. And Wrapbook allows our customers and clients to do this all in one portal, all in one place. So you don't have to say, well, I'm only using Google Drive. Can you send it to me on, this particular, can you send it to me on Google Drive when folks are using Dropbox or maybe email, which I never recommend sending confidential or PII data in email. Because you lose control of who has access to it with forwards and replies and those types of things. In using documents or simply using Wrapbook, you basically have all of your confidential and critical data in one portal that's controlled and protected with layers and layers of security.
So Darrell, really quick, just in your professional opinion, you've got Google Drive versus Dropbox versus email. You're saying email, stay far away from like attachments of personal identifiable information. You can't control it. Do you have any thoughts on like Google Drive, Dropbox, Wrapbook? Like, will people be pretty safe with those tools from your kind of vantage point?
You can implement better control when it comes to Dropbox and Google Drive. They're very similar. You basically have a directory structure where you can create folders and then have the content within them, whether it's files or more folders. And then you can share those with specific identities, like an email usually, right? Unless you have what Wrapbook implements, which is controlled identities. So when you become a team member here at Wrapbook, we create an identity for you and we share corporate resources only with that particular identity, which is really important. I know folks who sign up for raffle tickets with their emails, who sign up for like free air conditioners with their emails, and it really creates a space that is simply cannot be as trustworthy.
I will give the shameless Wrapbook plug. The main use case of Wrapbook, right, is the storage of your cast and crew workers, PII, so you can pay them compliantly. But in the product itself, on Wrapbook, we have a documents tab where you can actually upload your project's materials, whether that's a call sheet or a detailed log, and you can share it either with just the production staff or with the entire cast and crew. And then they can only get access to those documents when they're logged in with their Wrapbook profile on the platform. So it really relates to kind of these ideas. Super helpful.
Case in point. Thanks for calling that out, Cameron. All right, have a backup plan. We kind of pointed to this anecdotally earlier, or jokingly earlier, in how do you recover from a fire in your file cabinet? It's that you can't. And every now and then you'll have a situation where you need to recover, or you need to, go back to, maybe your data's been corrupted, or if you're using paper, someone spilled coffee on it, or the dog ate it, or there was some sort of like disaster or catastrophe happens to physical paper. But with Wrapbook, there's backup. You benefit from backups. You benefit from us planning for your business continuity and planning for disasters, and that you could roll back we could roll back to last known good copy of your data. And you can rest assured that it's protected, and you have a strong team of professionals who are checking to ensure the backups occur, checking for integrity and confidence in these backups. And I've never been able to do that with paper in all of my career, well, all of my life, even as a student.
Awesome. Well, for those of you that have been here, thanks so much for your attention. And Darrell, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. Feel free to drop questions into the chat we'll be happy to address them. Many people actually had already submitted some questions before we kicked off. And so, as you might be typing out your question, again, please feel free. I'm going to read off some of these, and Darrell, maybe you can help us out here. So the first question is, what is a secure and easy process of collecting and storing crew tax and bank information?
Well, I really want to point back to utilizing Wrapbook and how we present the documents tab to our customers, how you're able to upload any pertinent or important information. This also goes along with the confidential data that's already native to the platform that our customers and clients have to upload. That would be my first recommendation. But I would certainly say, stay away from trying to use email for that. But ultimately, a secure portal, which is how Wrapbook sort of takes the place of in certain situations, is most important.
Thanks. Here's another great question. It's, what are some best practices or practical policies you would advise to put in place for freelancers, specifically individuals who are using their own devices, have their own email accounts, and their own cloud storage?
I would say you want to try and control the critical resources, or the confidential resources, and this is the data. Folks use their own mobile devices for everything, right? So this is for work, this is for interacting with family, social media, and they aren't always protected by the most appropriate controls. With Wrapbook, we have a baseline of standardization to ensure that all of our devices and resources are up to date. We have virus protection. We have incident response and monitoring. So you want to really kind of use a resource that enables you to kind of benefit from these controls while you simply focus on the project.
Awesome. I'm going to switch gears. There are some awesome questions that were submitted beforehand, but I also want to just kind of address some of the things that I'm seeing in the Q&A. Here's one that's interesting, Darrell. Somebody's saying not just phishing emails, but phishing texts. Any thoughts on that?
That's right. So there's a concept called neighbor spoofing, right? So one of them is you will either get a call or a text message. Sometimes you get them from bots, but you can get a call or text message from a phone number that looks just like yours. So you're more inclined to either answer or respond to it. The other part about the phishing text is you may get a message that says, hey, there's a prize waiting for you. Click this link, or thanks for paying your bill. Here's some sort of like gift card, and they try to get you to click on the link. So it really goes back to verifying the resources, verifying the links, looking for red flags. That was a great suggestion. Thanks for that.
Absolutely. Here's something it's more of a statement than a question, but I think it's interesting. Connor Ashworth says, we had a phishing email that went to our accounting company that resulted in multiple fraudulent wire transfers. purchasing investment properties and even losing money from the agency as they got an email changing the deposit bank information for our production.
That is an incredible story. It happens more often than you think. Thanks for sharing that. I'll share another anecdotal story. I think I have time for it. There was a teaching district who suffered a phishing attack that was similar to this one. So an email went out and said, "Hey, we're updating the payroll, our payroll process. Click on this link and update your information." What happened is every teacher in this district clicked on this phishing link, and rerouted their paycheck to a malicious account unknowingly. And it actually didn't even recognize it until the next cycle of payroll was carried out. That was an excellent story. Thanks for sharing that, to reinforce how important it is to create security awareness, ensure your crew or your team is aware of business protocols and practices, and train on it, practice on it all the time. I fish my users at Wrapbook all the time.
You know, what's really cool, Darrell, is you've brought a level of vigilance and discipline to keeping Wrapbook secure from folks outside of the company, from people inside the company. It's really been a tremendous privilege and honor to work with you and learn about this with you as it applies at Wrapbook. Thank you so much for sharing some of the steps that production companies can take to keep, you know, their digital risks under control. You know, before we kind of sign off, you know, I want to talk about some of these things that you've implemented at Wrapbook to kind of keep us to like a bank grade level of security. I mean, you went through a number of really great tips, but, you know, if you look at this list here, like, I'm curious if you just kind of want to run through some of this to help me and the rest of the team watching here understand kind of how you think about this in relation to running a platform like Wrapbook securely.
Sure. Thanks for that, Cameron. I really want to give a shout out to, you know, all of the security's internal partners at Wrapbook, because when you have a team that buys into you know, a program like we're trying to build here, or we are building here at Wrapbook, it makes a really big difference. You're able to, you know, to carry out all of these different goals. So data encryption in rest and in transit and at rest. We have our algorithm here that we use, AES 256-bit. It's basically a level of strength when it comes to encrypting data. Multi-factor, we talked about how important that is. Premium partners goes and speaks to the third-party auditing and assessing your vendors and freelancers. Secure financial transactions. This also speaks to partnering with third parties that have the highest levels of controls and practices. Strict access controls, number 9. Points to, I touched a little bit on zero trust with like least privilege, need to know, separation of duties, the monitoring piece that kind of goes in hand with business continuity, investigating events to ensure that we don't have any breaches and none of our resources or customers have been compromised. Diligent HR process. This is background checks. This is ensuring that folks are trustworthy. You add, you know, top tier talent to your production, to your crew.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Really quick before we sign off, there's 2 more questions that we have open. One was, do you mind repeating what the best background check companies are? Not sure if you have any recommendations. I think you did mention that like there's a lot of them.
So yeah, so there are a lot of them. I'd say a quick Google search for background check agencies, background check companies will give you a list that you can start to select from. I'd say carry out your due diligence and ask them questions on how they conduct these background checks, what they do with the data, how they deliver the information to you. That also needs to be done securely.
Great. This is actually a really good question in relation to just like choosing Wrapbook as a solution. So somebody asked, given that a lot of this depends on end user devices, what does Wrapbook do to prevent compromised devices from negatively affecting things?
That's a great question. So we issue corporate devices. So if you are a Wrapbook employee, you have a corporate device. We have features that implement device trust to ensure that foreign devices or untrusted devices do not have access to our critical resources. This also complements controlled or centralized identities that we create for all Wrapbook employees. And there's for instance CIS benchmarks that we enforce for compliance on our devices. There's antivirus that we use. There's continuous monitoring. So we have a number of controls in place to kind of protect us and our customers from that.
That's awesome. That's actually a really interesting point that I don't know if we addressed. Like, is that something that, in production, like whether it's a really big show, a big movie, a large commercial, you will have sometimes full-time staff running around. Like a corporate issued device, is that something that you would recommend potentially for our more sophisticated clients that can kind of afford that?
If you can afford, if you have a team that can afford corporate devices, the short answer is yes. If not, then you can leverage technology to kind of help you with that. This goes back to the centralized and controlled identities, device trust, and certain portals that you leverage. For instance, with Wrapbook, you invite only the right or authorized personnel to your project, right? And you can do the same thing with other resources that you use to kind of prevent devices or bad actors from accessing your resources or your data.
Thanks, Darrell. There's another really good question in here that I want to address really quick before we end. And it comes from Alexa. She asks, can we go over identifying a dedicated expert again? And I wanted to kind of answer this and then pull you in on it, Darrell, because, at Wrapbook, we're building a scaling, fast-paced, dynamic technology platform. We can invest in bringing someone like you along to really, help us be very, very secure and bank grade with the platform. But for a production company that maybe doesn't have the resources to bring on a true subject matter expert as yourself, I'm curious, like, what are the best training tools out there for production organizations to be up to speed with keeping their production secure? And then second, kind of to Alexis's question, is like, do you have a suggestion as to who the dedicated expert should be at a production company to kind of keep the production company vigilant and thinking about this stuff?
That's a lot.
Sorry, yes, that's multi-layered.
So some recommendations, if you don't already have someone on the team, just like Cameron mentioned, organizations that can afford to have a director of security who handles the security program, training, who is keen on what you do about identities, how you isolate and protect confidential data, and just the networking of things. If you can do that, then that's great. You yourself won't have to worry about that. There are some resources out there, like SANS Institute is one. There are some certifying bodies that if you want to spin someone up on IT and security, CompTIA is one. The Cybrary is another one where you can start to understand certain disciplines and practices with respect to what's security all about and what should I focus on. It's a really broad industry at this point, but you have to, as you understand what's important to your project, you'll be able to narrow this down to what type of person do I need, or what type of education do we need to take someone through to focus on this.
Super helpful. And because we're not totally at the top of the hour, I'm going to sneak one last in. They ask, would you suggest an accounting team member have a company email address? Either, let me try to read this. Would you suggest accounting teams to have a company email, either Wrapbook or production company email address?
I think the question is, do you suggest that the accounting team have corporate or company email addresses? If that's the question, the short answer is yes. This goes back to business protocols, what's predictable, and policies, right? So if you have your accounting team who handles all of your money sending emails from whatever Gmail or whatever hotmail.com, it's unpredictable, right? You can't kind of enforce or leverage the right amount of scrutiny. But when you centralize those identities and tie them to corporate email accounts and identities, then it makes it a lot more predictable. It lowers your risk profile and gives you more control.
Super helpful. Well, Darrell, thank you again for spending the time with us. Absolutely enjoyed it. I hope that those watching were able to learn some lessons. And if you have any questions at all about the session, or if you'd like to join us on future sessions, please check out our events portal at wrapbook.com. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us at marketing@wrapbook.com. We'd love to chat with you. Thank you again. And this presentation will be available to review in the next week or two. Thanks again. Godspeed.
Thanks, Cameron. This is great. Thanks, everyone.